Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, April 22nd, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America. On the program today, Ann Neumann, the author of The Good Death, an exploration of dying in America, contributing nonfiction editor at Guernica, writing in the Baffler. Who owns vaccines? How nationalist IP-hoarding will prolong the pandemic. Meanwhile, India breaks a record one day of COVID cases. The vaccination rate in the U.S. slows as we bump up against the conservative deniers. Meanwhile, speaking of conservative deniers, Republicans Throwback Thursday. They're looking to stage another debt ceiling fight. Meanwhile, Joe Biden to recognize the Armenian genocide. New report, Donald Trump surpassed the IG report that showed his administration was blocking Puerto Rican aid. A breaking story, the Postal Service police have apparently been running a covert program to monitor social media. Senate confirms Vanita Gupta. And on Earth Day, Joe Biden convenes a climate summit. Spoiler alert, we need to do more and faster. The Manhattan DA will no longer prosecute prostitution, which of course is no substitute for legalization. And lastly, Idaho is primed to pass a fetal heartbeat law. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. Glad you could make it. Joining me, as always, is Emma Vigeland. Emma, how are you?
I am well. How are you? Happy Throwback Thursday, as you put it.
That's right. It's Throwback Thursday. That's the first time I think I've ever said those words, actually. But the idea to wake up to the idea that Republicans are now going to rediscover the debt ceiling
after increasing the debt by $7 trillion under Trump.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even the size of the debt. I want to remind people what this means with the debt ceiling. The money's already been spent. The money has already been spent on all. Whenever we get to the debt ceiling, the question isn't whether we're going to spend more money. The question is whether we're going to pay the bill that we have already expended. It is really like saying, you know what? I've really got to curb my credit card spending when the bill comes and you say, I'm not going to pay it. Now, with all that said, there is no reason for us not to continue to deficit spend and to in this particular environment that we're in. But this particular performative action by the Republicans, and everybody has done it over the years. You know, there one or two lawmakers will vote against the raising of the debt ceiling as a way of establishing, as making some type of political point. We're going to get a good apples to apples comparison as to how the Biden administration will handle this versus the Obama administration did. So that could very well be interesting, but we will stay on top of that. First, I want to play a clip. I interviewed Alex Zajac the other day for the second exclusive hour we do on Peacock. about his piece, How Bill Gates Impeded Global Access to COVID Vaccines. And we're going to be talking to Ann Neumann, who's going to give us sort of a broader sense of this question. But we're starting to see the implications in various places around the world of the failure of the West, essentially, to make vaccinations and vaccines available to be produced in other countries. India right now is going through a devastating surge of COVID infections. And here is a report from Democracy Now!
We should just quickly say they broke the single-day COVID case rise record.
Indeed.
Previously held by the U.S., so it's over 314,000 cases.
Yes, and this is accelerating. Here is a report from Democracy Now! Raina Ayub is outlining just how dire it's becoming in India.
It is an apocalyptic situation in India right now. It's heartbreaking not just to be a citizen of this country, but it's heartbreaking to be a journalist who is bearing witness to the events that are unfolding in India, especially with the number of COVID deaths that we are witnessing, and many of them in their early 30s. The two friends that I lost were in their mid-30s. Their families are still in the ICU. Yesterday, 22 patients lost their lives at one go in a hospital after a tank that was providing oxygen to the ventilators leaked for 30 minutes, and all 22 patients lost their lives in a span of an hour. And there is, it's like this country is breathless. On Twitter, in hospitals, whenever I'm going to report, everybody is begging for oxygen. As I'm talking, hospitals after hospitals in the national capital, not far from the Prime Minister's residence, are petitioning the High Court of the country to tell them that we have no oxygen left in our hospitals. State governments are accusing each other of oxygen theft, that they are stealing each other's oxygen tankers. It's that kind of a situation. An investigation done by a news website, Scroll, day before, suggested that the government of India had invested billions of rupees from the Prime Minister, the PM Cares Fund, for setting up 162 oxygen plants. And so far, only 33 such plants have been functional in India. So clearly, we have not learned our lessons from the pandemic last year when a lockdown was announced and there was a migrant exodus. The situation in India right now is apocalyptic because the visuals are searing. I just wrote about the story of this young woman who's in a mid-30s, who had been wanting to have a child for 17 years. She gave birth to twin daughters, and within hours she died because she was COVID positive and there was no oxygen in the hospital. So that's the level of devastation that we are seeing. Families are carrying their patients on hand carts and stretchers and carrying oxygen cylinders and begging for them on social media. And we're still talking about the privileged section, Amy. We're not even talking about rural India, from which there is so much underreporting, and we don't know how many deaths are being reported in rural India.
That's a harrowing story.
Horrible.
And account.
Horrible. And, the opportunity for these type of situations to exist throughout other parts in the world are there in large part because we as a world are not doing enough to make sure that we get vaccines out the door, or at the very least that these countries are put in a position to produce low-cost vaccinations. I mean, it really is stunning. We're going to talk more.
Well, at the very least, we're not releasing some of the stockpile, but what should be done is a patent waiver.
Well, and that's what we're going to be talking to Ann Neumann about.
Exactly.
I mean, we don't have nearly enough vaccinations to make the dent, but we could easily, with one essentially decision, make it possible for the world to produce enough of those vaccinations. And we will talk to Ann Neumann about that in a moment. First, we'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this. Folks, this episode is brought to you by CuriosityStream. It is a subscription streaming service, but it's different from all those others. It is basically like, I guess, Netflix for nerds, or like it's sort of like what. Well, part of it is sort of like what the History Channel used to be, frankly. Now it's just like a bunch of reality shows and, Save My Pawn Shop or whatever it is.
And, alien shows that aren't history related and, in fact, quite dubious.
Aren't even like necessarily reality related. Anyways, Curiosity Stream, like I say, it's like a Netflix for nerds. It is, you get unlimited access to all sorts of documentaries and sort of docu-style programming that is really fascinating. It starts at just $2.99 a month. You can get it for $20, $19.99 a year. And for our audience, the first 30 days are completely free if you sign up at curiositystream.com/Majority Report. Use the promo code Majority Report, all one word, lowercase, no quotes, just Majority Report, during the sign-up process.
This all looks incredible.
It's amazing. And the other night, I watched Richard Attenborough. Do you know who that guy is? He's sort of like the British...
Isn't it David Attenborough?
David Attenborough, sorry. And David Attenborough. And he's got, there's a whole bunch of them that he's done on there. But the one that I got caught up in was Ant Mountain. And he traveled to some place, to the Swiss Alps. And there is a mountain where there is like all these ant colonies that are, like sizable little hills. And then the ants are incredibly territorial. So not only do you see how they some of them, they'll be like mixed families of ants, billions of ants. And then there's others where it's like just one sort of genetic strain of ants, and they go about 10, 12 feet and they bump up against another, and then they have these wars. It's nuts. But they've got all sorts of type of documentaries. I got one queued up on Stalin's James Bond, who was a real sort of like James Bond type figure for the Soviet Union. He was a master spy in Japan. He's sort of widely considered to be like the model for James Bond. So there's a whole sort of range of different things. Also great stuff for like kids, specifically for kids, and then stuff like, so I'm going to watch the ant thing again with Saul because he's going to love it.
There's one called The Neanderthals' Dark Secrets. So Sam Harris might be interested in that.
That's true. There's nature, there's history, there's technology, there's society, there's lifestyle. They're adding new titles all the time at Curiosity Stream. It is also available on all the platforms. Web app, you can do it on Roku or Android or Xbox One, smart TVs, iOS, Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Kindle, Apple TV. You can get it anywhere. Like I say, $19.99 a year, $2.99 or $2.99 a month. You can check it out. Go to curiositystream.com/Majority Report for unlimited access to the world's top documentaries and nonfiction series. Like I say, for only $2.99 a month or just $19.99 for the whole year. And for Majority Report fans, use promo code Majority Report. You will get your first 30 days of Curiosity Stream completely free. Check it out. We will put a link in the YouTube and podcast.
And it's available on Roku. I'm going to get it tonight.
Yeah, that's what it says. All of them.
All of them. Amazon, Fire, and Kindle.
They put them out everywhere. All right. Now I'd like to welcome to the program Ann Neumann. She is the author of The Good Death and Exploration of Dying in America. She's a contributing nonfiction editor to Guernica. And she's writing in the Baffler, Who Owns Vaccines? How Nationalist IP Hoarding Will Prolong the Pandemic. Ann, thanks for joining us. Oh, is she there?
I think she might have just froze. We'll try to get her back on here.
This is, and we should say, this is coming at a time where a new poll put out by Data Progress finds that 60% of U.S. voters want President Joe Biden to endorse the motion by more than 100 in lower and middle income countries to remove patent barriers on COVID-19 vaccines at the World Trade Organization. Only 28% disagreed. Ann, do we have Ann?
Looks like she might be having trouble connecting. Do you want to go to?
We'll just go to
yeah, she just
music and
dropped
we'll
off.
get her back on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think joining us, excuse us for that little brief technical situation. Ann Neumann is with us. Ann, welcome to the program. I'm here with Emma Vigeland.
Hey.
Thanks for joining us. So, Ann, I was just reading a new poll that finds 60% of the voters want Joe Biden to endorse a motion by more than 100 lower and middle income countries to remove patent barriers on COVID-19 vaccines at the World Trade Organization. Only 28% of Americans disagreed. So this is, about as popular as about anything in the country could be. Give us a sense of just like, what the worldwide situation is when it comes to vaccines.
Yeah. Hi, Sam. Hi, Emma. Thanks for having me. The vaccine industry is not really popular with big pharma because they don't make a lot of money from it up until these days, right? The pandemic has changed that business model significantly because of all the government money. But up until now, vaccines have been lower cost in the United States. They're covered by the Affordable Care Act. And as we know, that's kind of a precarious model. In some cases, the current vaccine is being charged to insurance companies. But around the world, the global drug supply, the supply chain basically runs through India by way of China. And so that's a rather precarious situation when we are reliant on a few countries. I think, in fact, something like 70 or 80% of our drugs in total are made by India. And 70% of those APIs or active pharmaceutical ingredients are coming from China. So if there's any disruption, like that opening clip that I think you just watched about how the pandemic is ravaging Gujarat and other parts of India, that indeed is a problem for all of us because it could possibly affect the global supply chain of drugs.
What is and so we have this motion by more than 100 lower and middle income countries because clearly they can't afford it. Just elaborate on that concept, because I'm not sure that people in the United States get the concept of like the country just can't afford to produce these vaccines as the way it is now constructed, our vaccine regime.
Right. And that's because these countries have been plagued by capitalism and other sort of extractive colonial practices for a long period of time. These are economies that are not as robust as ours. And that's, of course, relative. And they're countries with populations that do not live the kind of lifestyle that we live. The global South is a very different place. And in part, that is because of the global North and our rapacious history. And so what these countries have been doing, and India in particular, after independence, the country said, we are establishing laws that favor our people over these colonial paradigms, and we want drugs to remain affordable. And in the past, companies like Novartis have gone to the Indian courts and said, we do not want any of our drugs to be generics. We don't want Indian manufacturers to reverse engineer them and make them affordable to more people. And they have continued to lose because the Indian Supreme Court has held its line. But not a lot of countries have that kind of toughness when it comes to resisting American imperialism and power. And so they're left at the moment, and I know that we can get into the current structure, but they're left at the moment to kind of beg for drugs that indeed, when countries can't get enough vaccines, we all suffer, because the longer this pandemic goes on, the more chance there are of strains developing and that virus coming back to us.
What are the countries that come to mind that are experiencing outside of, we're talking about India's COVID surge, but that are bearing the brunt of not really having, I guess, the court infrastructure that India does in order to push back against the power of these manufacturers?
There aren't many that can. I mean, the larger countries with bigger populations, but it's really, these companies exist in the global north. And as we've seen, they've been protected by their home countries. I mean, the entire Operation Warp Speed was kind of a raining of resources, like $10 billion down on 6 individual companies. And, you know, even the Pfizer drug that was developed with BioNTech, a German company, they received $445 million from the German government. So this is like a global north monopolization of this resource that is necessary all over the globe. And there are a number of forces that are protecting that. One is just government power and
excuse me one second, Ann, before we get into the sort of the structure of that, I just want to get also a sense of, you know, let's just broaden out for one moment and just, you know, like work on the premise of like the value of the vaccine being widely distributed around the globe. I mean, obviously there's just sort of a humanitarian obligation, it seems, in the context of a pandemic. We certainly wouldn't stand for this if it was, you know, Alabama or New Jersey or, you know, Iowa, that like they just don't have vaccines. And we're okay with that. We wouldn't allow for that. We also wouldn't do the same with Canada or Mexico, it seems to me. So we have a humanitarian obligation to do this. We have a sort of a self-serving one insofar as like this is a pandemic and we've seen we're not protected. You know, if this continues on, what are the other implications of this pandemic sort of ravaging in other countries?
Yeah, well, you're more optimistic about what we would or wouldn't do than I am.
Fair enough.
Yeah. At the moment, there are 130 countries that don't have a single dose. And these are large populous countries. Our obligation as human beings, and I like to do what you're doing. This is exactly what I do in the piece. I step back and say, oh, the current structure, oh, the current government. The largest issue is that millions of people are dying unnecessarily. Millions. As a country that once held a leadership position on this globe, we have lost that, not just under the last administration, but also because we have failed to address this global crisis with any kind of ethical understanding of what the value of life is. All this America First stuff, even under Biden, you know, this 200 million doses distributed in his first 100 days, that's fantastic. But there are a lot of us who could stay home. Those doses could be used by, say, Nigerian nurses who are just trying to save lives. And so this America First mentality has prevented us from being leaders, from saving millions of lives, but also from eradicating a plague that still is over our head, that still could do great damage to us. We are by far not out of the woods on this. So yes, on the soul level, we are hideous right now.
And I would say that, like, you know, if that's not enough to inspire people, and the idea that there could be variants that come back around is not enough to inspire, you know, we are in the midst. We've been in the midst really for over a decade of this sort of pivot to the Pacific, where we are, you know, theoretically building up some type of vanguard to Chinese, I guess, expansion, or influence maybe. But if we genuinely believed that China was some type of national security threat or had the potential to be one, like, what would be the value from that perspective in terms of like diplomacy and influence around the world if we either A, stop preventing people from getting vaccines, or actually facilitated these 132 countries to get some vaccines?
Oh yeah, it would do us a huge amount of goodwill. It would be very good for the United States to do what we could to save lives in these countries where they can't access the vaccine right now. However, we kind of set up this paradigm, or at least American citizens, namely Bill Gates, was very influential in setting up this paradigm of America first, of not thinking, I mean, if diplomacy compels us, by all means, we should use it. Saving lives should be our first effort. But from the very beginning, that has not been our intention as a country.
Can you go through the specific, and so now let's look towards the actual, the investment that we made as a society in these, because the story is like, that I think a lot of people feel is like, well, they did all the research and development. They hustled on this. They really risked a lot. And by they, I mean the Pfizers, the Johnson & Johnson, the Moderna. There's a couple other companies that didn't succeed. But they didn't really risk anything, did they? We did. We invested in it. This is a classic case of socializing the cost and privatizing the profits, I guess. So walk us through how much the U.S. government actually gave to the development and creation of these, and if we need to, even go back before it became a COVID vaccine and just the concept of mRNA.
Yeah, mRNA was developed by the National Institutes of Health for the most part. So that was all government funding. I'm not sure of the dollar amounts, but it was big money. And the NIH has been doing this kind of development for a very long time. There are two ruses that the pharmaceutical industry likes to use. One is that if we address their practices, maybe rein in their prices, it will stifle innovation, which in my mind is a ridiculous acknowledgement of the fact that they're not really here to save lives, right? That altruism stuff is out the window with that statement. And the other thing that we've seen come out now, particularly as the dollar amounts of public funds have been written about, the other thing that they're saying, and that Bill Gates really grabbed onto, was special manufacturing. Like, we cannot make our recipe for this vaccine open source because, first of all, nobody can do it the way we can do it. Special manufacturing is a patented process. And secondly, it'll stifle innovation if you interrupt our IP rights. So they have used those two arguments extensively over a long period of time, and it works. If you Google right now, intellectual property innovation, you will see all sorts of people writing for the New York Times and Washington Post, mostly industry people, but still, they're very invested in this. And they've done a great job of using that in the moment to monopolize the access to public funds, but also this kind of new structure of government paying for not only the research and development, but also the distribution. And then on top of that, they're negotiating individually with countries, right? So when the Ukraine went to find vaccine doses, they were forced to sign a non-disclosure contract. So they're almost negotiating in the dark. Countries don't really know what other countries are paying. So then they can't really negotiate good prices or even affordable prices for themselves. It's a racket, really.
All right. Well, so let's be explicit though. Like, how much money did the U.S. government pay? You mentioned that BioNTech, which is partnered with Pfizer, got $500 million approximately from the German government. How much money? But the story that we hear about Pfizer is, well, they didn't participate in Operation Warp Speed, so they didn't get any money. But that's not true.
It's not true. They got 1.95 billion, I believe. 10 billion went into Operation Warp Speed. And so they still got, almost 2 billion to buy a number of doses, right? And that payment was guaranteed whether the doses worked or not. I mean, that agreement was way before the study was even done.
So just to be clear here, I mean, this is like me saying to Emma, I want to encourage you to build a hot dog stand, and I am going to buy right now $1.5 billion worth of hot dogs. And if you can't figure out how to do the stand, don't worry, you're still going to get that money. As long as you give a good faith effort, you're going to get that $1.5 billion. I mean, so there was no risk associated with what Pfizer did here at all, that we gave them a $1.5 billion grant, and they weren't even part of the supposed program. And with Moderna, we did the same thing in terms of promising to buy, but we also invested in the hot dog bun technology, the boiler that you had, right? I mean, that's basically it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, from top to bottom, this was not a risk for these companies. I mean, maybe a risk in their reputation or something, but they've survived worse.
And it was not just not a risk. I mean, the fact that they were even in this race to begin with, I remember in the midst of the pandemic, stock prices soaring, and now you see reports of the billions in stock buybacks that executives are getting from AstraZeneca, J&J, and Pfizer, et cetera, that essentially could be used to, Common Dreams wrote an article about how that amount of money, $23 billion or so, could fund vaccine distribution in the entire continent of Africa. Is that the right number, Sam?
$26 billion.
26.
Yeah.
What were the other companies? I mean, if the idea was that there was a reputation to their, I just want to really make it clear that they had virtually no risk associated with any of this. All of the stories that we are told as to why these companies deserve profits, or these massive profits, involve the risk that is associated with them trying to develop this thing. You mentioned risk to reputation. I don't even remember what the other companies who clearly did not come up with a vaccine, who they were. So, the risk is not terribly, it seems to me like, maybe within the pharmaceutical industry, if there's another opportunity to pay off billions of dollars, but there doesn't seem to have been any risk at all associated with this.
No, and the profits are uncommon, right? Like the vaccine industry, as I said earlier, was never something that Big Pharma really wanted to dabble in because, they get their money from, say, a drug that you need to take every day to keep your blood pressure up or down. The special cancer drugs are what they really want. And I think there's also rumbling right now that these big pharma companies that do have successful vaccines want to raise the price once that they feel as though we're out of emergency mode. We're looking at a future where I assume you're both vaccinated, but that vaccine, according to Art Kaplan, who I spoke to for this piece, might last us a year, and we're looking at other strains, and we're looking at a future where this is something that we have to address with vaccines on a regular basis, regular ongoing basis. And that looks promising to these large companies that now hold the rights to these vaccines and are, poised to make lots more money.
Let's turn our attention to Bill Gates on this. I mean, you touch on his involvement in this. I mentioned that I had for another in another outlet had interviewed Alex Zajac, who did a really sort of a very deep dive into Bill Gates' participation in this and his sort of really malignant, I think it's fair to say, influence on public health. It is not terribly dissimilar to his influence on education in this country. Just want to remind everybody, he spent about $1 billion through the Gates Foundation. There were other other programs. $1 billion on essentially what was an experiment that took place more or less in the Pacific Northwest with a bunch of schools, maybe half dozen schools. That money acted like a magnet and almost like a source of gravity, and all of that, and it brought all of it fundamentally changed our education system in this country for 20 years. And after 10 years of that, they commissioned the Rand Corporation to assess the value of their experiment, and the Rand Corporation said, total failure. we should have done exactly what the educator said. And that was it. It was barely reported upon. It was about 3 years ago. And it feels like this is the same situation. Will you talk about Bill Gates' involvement in COVAX and like where that came from and what they promised to do and what they've been able to achieve with it?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear the shout out to Alex. It's a great piece, and he's a buddy. So you call Bill Gates malignant. I would call him deadly at the moment. He also has a large role in the climate crisis and is influencing our approach to it. But what he did in this situation was he heard the noise from Oxford, who had a promising vaccine, that they wanted to make it open source, accessible to everyone. And he convinced them to not do so. He partnered them up basically with AstraZeneca. Alex calls him, I think, the most influential man in global public health. And that means that this influence is wielded by an individual who's been told he was a genius since, I don't know, he was working in his dad's garage or whatever, who probably has a lot of yes people around him and who strongly believes that corporations and philanthropy can save the day. So this weakening of government, which we know always compromises equality and egalitarian policy, not that we're a model of that at the moment, but he is, because of where his wealth comes from, a real advocate for sticking by intellectual property laws and patent rights. And I think that was a real surprise to global health leaders because of the future that we were looking at more than a year ago. These leaders were saying, there's no way that we can maintain IP laws. We're going to have to go around that. And Bill Gates stepped in with his money and his panache and changed the course of history.
I mean, if folks want another example of the danger of a plutocracy, it is that for a guy, him expending several $1 billion in the context of this pandemic is like, functionally like you losing like 3 or 4 of the books on your bookshelf. And then maybe at one point you notice it, but not really. No. But just based upon his belief in IP, he convinces Oxford, like you say, to not make this open source. Mm-hmm. Had a history of doing this. I think it was World War II. I can't remember what it was that they had developed something that I can't remember exactly what it was that they basically provided for the world. He also pushed the development of this COVAX, which is almost a rival initiative to one that was starting to come out of the World Health Organization, and it was his way of basically controlling the response and heading off this move to get rid of IP for these vaccinations. Tell us what COVAX's plan was and what their stated goal was and whether they've achieved it.
Oh, well, they haven't achieved it. They are behind schedule and behind budget, whether that's distribution of vaccines or gathering donations from larger countries. The objective was never thorough or advanced. It was always kind of a compromise organization. And they wanted to supply maybe 20% of the world's vaccines, and then countries were on their own. And they wanted to do that through gathering donations from richer countries, which hasn't really happened. I think the United States gave some money, but it's pretty limited. And then use that profit to subsidize vaccine doses elsewhere. So it's still a market approach. Right? It's still saying, well, we have a problem here, but we're going to let the market solve it, and we'll do a little charity on the side. It was never a robust solution to the problem. In other words.
And to hear Zajac write about it, it was basically just a co-optation of an effort that was going to be far more collectivist, I guess.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I mean, at the very beginning, we're talking the WHO and other organizations really thought that there would be a sharing of information around the globe, not just vaccine recipes, but also manufacturing techniques and the materials necessary to make the vaccines. We really thought at the beginning that this was going to be a global effort, just because of the size of the crisis that we were looking at. And when that didn't come about, it was a bit of a shock to people. I think just the development of COVAX, kind of fully formed out of Bill Gates's head, was a surprise to people. And he's been very successful in rerouting all of the resources through it.
Tell us, you mentioned the Ukraine, but will you walk us through that story? Because this really, it's almost an extortion on some level, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I mean, anytime in my mind that you say, we will help save your life if you give us money, there's a kind of extortion taking place. So the Ukraine, after a recent revolution, had realized that there was a large amount of graft involved in the prior administration. So the new administration and courts passed a lot of laws to prevent non-disclosure contracts with the government. And this was meant to stop corruption, which was rampant all over the Ukraine. And these were very good laws. However, when the Ukraine saw outbreaks among their population, they were hustling around to try and secure some doses. But every pharma they approached required that they sign a contract with non-disclosure riders in it, meaning they could not discuss the details of the contract, could not make them public with their population. This put them in the double bind of either breaking their own laws and getting doses of the vaccine, or not getting doses of the vaccine. And it was a terrible place for the country to be in. And they did what they had to do to save the lives of their people. They got a limited number of vaccine doses. But that's what the nature of these contracts is. It is shady and extortionist. And why would you want other countries to have to negotiate blindly, to not know what rates were being received by other countries around the world? It's unconscionable. And yet it is happening everywhere.
And so is the point, from the perspective of pharma, to make sure that the price secured by Ukraine is not disclosed? Is it the idea is that, like, look, we as pharma, we can't afford, from a public relations standpoint, to not provide them with vaccinations whatsoever. However, we also, as a business enterprise that wants to gouge as much money as squeeze literally every single dollar we can out of people, we can maybe discount them a price, but we don't want to give a baseline for other countries to negotiate against. Is that it? I mean, it's basically we're not going to lose money by giving them this vaccine, but we're not going to make as much as we could if we keep it a secret that we're giving them a little bit of a break for PR purposes, essentially.
Right. I think the pharma companies are doing fine on PR here in the United States. You know, everybody's talking like, oh, they saved us. Thank God for science. And so we conflate pharma corporate practices with science, and we give them the good nudge. They weren't really popular with the American people up until COVID-19. I don't know that the pharma really cares how much other countries think of them, particularly countries that are in Eastern Europe or the global South. Although one would expect that they would have some sort of conscience about the fact that they are trying to get as much money as they can. So Big Pharma has conflated ethics and profit. They think that their goal is to sell vaccines and save lives, but really what they're doing is making profit, and that's not really good for their public image.
Well, yeah, and that, I mean, that's why I say public relations, because if they don't provide this to Ukraine, this builds the support for essentially suspending their, or maybe revoking their intellectual property protections. So give us a sense of like what Joe Biden could do with, I think, essentially a stroke of the pen in terms of providing over 100 countries with at least one shot, essentially.
Yeah, he could do it with a stroke of a pen. He should have done it as soon as he came in. This should have been done more than a year ago. There are a couple of reasons why, or there are a couple examples of when that was done in the past with AIDS drugs. There was a lawsuit where an Indian company said, listen, we're going to make this generic drug accessible to the global south, and did so, and won their lawsuit. And another example is a Novartis lawsuit in India that took place. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier. And the Indian courts protected the very wonderful generic laws that exist in India. So there is precedent. We do know how to do this. And the Biden administration should have done it immediately.
And that is to basically strip these, just to be clear for the audience, strip these manufacturers of their intellectual property patent protection.
Right, Emma, as it would work, it would just shield the formula for these vaccines. I think it has to also include some of the manufacturing techniques. But also, I mean, these drugs aren't manufactured in the United States. You know, like Johnson & Johnson does some of their manufacturing in-house, but for the most part, you know, it's already farmed out to other places. But that knowledge has to also be shared in order for manufacture to pick up in low to middle income countries and become accessible.
I mean, do we have a set? Well, before we get there, what would be the mechanics of this? Like, what authority would Joe Biden be able to do? Would be able to sort of suspend these patents, both from a formula and from the production technique? What is the mechanics, or what is the authority?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sam. I'm not sure what the legal mechanism would be.
All right.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, so with that said, but it's quite clear. I mean, he's debating whether or not to do it. People are calling on him. He clearly has it in some form or another. So, what about the production capacity? I've read about in Bangladesh, factories saying we can do this. But do we have a sense of, like, let's say tomorrow Biden was to exercise this authority, say, these formulas are now open source, and this means in which to produce this is now open source. Where would we anticipate this being? Where would we anticipate production happening?
Oh, I would say India, again, the country that manufactures 80% of the United States drugs. But also, I mean, drugs are made all over the world in generic form and otherwise. So it's not as though these big pharmas are the only ones who can provide this vaccine or manufacture it. It's the fact that this specific recipe has been patented under intellectual property law, which we could discuss, the meaning of it, the evolution of it. And that idea has been captured and held for the sake of corporate profit. That is solely it. The only thing that is impeding the manufacture all over the world is these individual corporations holding on to their ability to make money from it.
And in fact, we're seeing that it's not necessarily the most effective method. I mean, Johnson & Johnson contaminated at least 50 million doses of their vaccine, and yet they're still trying to make the argument that they're the only ones that have the capacity to.
Right. I mean, just that attitude that they're the only ones who could do this, that their manufacturers are, their research people, their manufacturing experts are the only ones who can put out this vaccine is really it's a biased view of the world.
Well, it's also, I mean, it's demonstrably incorrect, as did today. The New York Times is writing about federal inspectors fear more vaccines, more than 15 million were exposed to contamination at the subcontractor that Johnson & Johnson uses. Apparently, the FDA has been aware of this company's problems, the subcontracted Emergent, I guess it's called, their problems in production for almost a year at this point, at least. So let's just give us a little bit of background on this so-called intellectual property. The patents really is what we're talking about. This is not, patents weren't designed for this, were they?
No, and the law developed over time to give them a particular protection that we're seeing now, the bad ramifications of this kind of construing of the law. Intellectual property is a strange term, right? So patents we usually think of as protecting objects. This idea, this science for the vaccine is now being wrongly constricted. I just lost my train of thought. I think the problem with intellectual property is that it's really hard to understand the law, right? And so quite often it is a complicated issue that we don't understand, don't get into, and that acts as a screen for companies that want to use it to protect their own rights. This problem has exacerbated over the past 50 years, and Dean Baker was fantastic in explaining it to me for the Baffler piece. But what we found is that it's favored corporations over time, to the extent that we find that millions of people are dying for the sake of corporate profit. I don't know how to simplify it any more than that. Even if intellectual property rights work for, say, a novel that I've written, or I don't know, a piece of music that you've written, we're in a different realm at the moment. We're talking about millions of lives. And so clearly we have to readdress the laws that we're abiding by at the moment.
And I would also argue that on top of the fact that we are showing fealty to these sort of dubious property rights over the lives of literally hundreds of millions of people, to use the analogy of your book, I gave you an advance.
Right.
I share in those, I have some ownership of that book. We may have negotiated a certain thing where you have certain rights, but I've licensed that book already. I'm out.
You got your money.
and the point is that the U.S. government paid for these things. And so we're subsidizing the development of these things. And then we subsidized the purchase and the distribution of these things all throughout. And to the extent that it was necessary, we didn't really get anything back, right? In terms of, we didn't get anything. If the paradigm of those who risk the money deserve the biggest returns, which is what we're constantly told by these same companies, well, we were the ones who risked the money. It should be our returns and our ability to sort of open source this.
Yeah, and yet I do think in the United States, like we're all in New York here, I think, we're all vaccinated, and there are people in other parts of the world that are looking at 3 years for that. So, in the United States, it's been a raw deal. But if we paid that much money and we were finding that vaccine doses were being used around the world, I could probably handle that loss of money. I could probably say, okay, let the corporations go. But the fact is that they're extorting this money from us and they're not being effective. Their plan is not working. People are going to continue dying for a long period of time. And then in the next year, we're going to need more vaccine doses.
Right. And lastly, let me just ask you this, getting back to Bill Gates a little bit. Do you have a sense of, in this community where where folks expressed surprise at the approach that COVAX was taken, that there is a more jaundiced view of Bill Gates's role in this world? I mean, and by this world, I mean specifically the public health world, because I mean, at one point he was considered laughable when he showed up at these forums, and then of course when you shove several billions of dollars, then all of a sudden everybody likes you because one way or another their funding is coming from you. Has there been any expression of like, oh boy, this money is coming with certain strings that I didn't quite anticipate?
I think a small community that kind of saw his workings at the very beginning might not think of him as positively as they did before. But if you ask anyone on the street right now, they think that Bill Gates is a great guy. He's very involved in, public health around mosquito nets, all of that. And I think this role that he has played in the eyes of many who don't understand exactly what he's been doing, I think to many people, they think he's a great guy for helping us get the vaccine distributed. That's the sadness of and the power of Bill Gates's PR team.
Unless you're the anti-vax crowd who thinks you're being microchipped by him. They don't think him so positively.
Right. Although we still have a lot to learn about what the size and effectiveness of that group is.
True.
Indeed. Ann Neumann, author of The Good Death, An Exploration of Dying in America, and her piece, Who Owns Vaccines? How Nationalist IP Hoarding Will Prolong the Pandemic. We will put a link to that from the Baffler at majority.fm. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, folks, we're going to take a... We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this. So we're back. Today is Earth Day, and as such, there's a Joe Biden is holding a climate summit where they're trying to get collective action. He made a pledge the other day to cut emissions by half until between now and 2030. And we need to be doing a lot more, moving a lot quicker, as it were. We just had, and one of those things, if we're going to be doing any of this, is going to have to involve the U.S. Senate figuring out a way that it can pass legislation that the president supports and that Democrats ostensibly support. And that's going to involve getting rid of the filibuster, or at the very least, modifying it in some way. And there's really one person who has the greatest amount of responsibility for that. And that is the leader of the Democrats in the Senate. And here is an ad that Chuck Schumer has put out about how much he likes to ride his bike. And that ostensibly that means that he is going to be able to fight climate change. Here is that ad.
Saturdays, I'm in New York. I ride my bike along the Brooklyn waterfront. I'm not a spandex guy. I'm not going at 40 miles an hour. I ride slowly. I take in the beauty of Brooklyn, and I wonder if this waterfront will be around as my little grandson grows up. If we don't take bold action on climate change now, it's going to change the shape of our city for the worse. We don't have any time to waste. With Democrats in charge, the Senate is treating climate change like the crisis it is, and I'll fight for our future.
Now,
he doesn't have a primary opponent yet.
He does not have a primary opponent yet. When I hear fight and think biking and think Schumer, I remember how he and his family fought the building of bike lanes in Brooklyn. I think that was about 8 or 9 years ago.
Well, now I think of spandex because he put that image in all of our
Indeed.
minds for some reason.
But if Chuck Schumer really wants to fight for climate change and meet the promise of the implication of Democrats controlling the Senate, Chuck Schumer has to do more than simply ride his bike around Brooklyn. He has to push for some form of repeal of the filibuster, whether that's a reformation of it in some fashion or another. And if he's not able to influence folks like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, one has to wonder, like, what is the value of having him in leadership? Maybe nobody can do it, but maybe somebody else should have a try.
Well, I mean, I agree entirely. He is not the kind of arm-twisting Senate Majority Leader that is necessary in these current times because the clock is ticking, specifically on climate change, and there needs to be bold action in that area by the Senate Majority Leader in order to get Manchin and Sinema, Kyrsten Sinema specifically, speaking out against the PRO Act the other day, which was leaked, I think, to the press. And those are two major priorities that need to be passed. And
Indeed.
With the filibuster being eliminated.
Yeah, and Chuck Schumer perceives himself as the concierge sometimes more than a leader of the Senate. But that's all our time for today. We will be back. Emma and I will be back tomorrow. We will see you then. Or we will see you now.
Yes.
In fact, Emma will see you now. I will see you now to say adieu. We're going to be heading into the fun half of the program. And joining us will be Brandon Sutton. And, of course, old Matt. Old Matt will be joining Emma in the fun half with new Matt and Brendan. Just a reminder, we launched our Discord channel, and we already, since I announced it almost exactly 24 hours ago, we've had over 1,200 people join.
Wow.
So you go to majoritydiscord.com and sign up. And sign up for the Discord, and you get to communicate with folks from all different platforms in the Majority Report universe, as it were. And if you want to become a member of the program, head over to jointhemajorityreport.com. It is your membership that makes this show possible. When you do, you get not only support the free show, you get it free of commercials, and you get access to the fun half. And then we're going to work out other features. I don't know if we're going to do anything with the Discord, but we're getting all our ducks in a row. And then, like with those new Republican anti-protest laws, we're just going to mow them down, and it'll be perfectly legal with our motor vehicle. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off at 3 p.m. today. Check out Nomi Show, the Nomiki Show on youtube.com/the Nomiki Show and twitch.tv, _Nomiki_show. And now coming in for the fun half, old Matt, what's happening on Doom these days?
How you doing, Sam? Well, first, actually, I have to ask you a favor. My dad tried to get through the show yesterday, Binder Dad, because it was his birthday and he wanted a shofar. There we go.
You have to finish. I say give Binder Dad a shofar, drop of a hat.
Perfect. Now that that's out of the way and my dad's happy, tune in tonight, youtube.com/Matt Binder, 9 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be looking at the right-wing freakout over the results of the case against Derek Chauvin. Right wing has completely lost their mind over this, from Fox News to the right wingers online. And we'll be looking at all of them. youtube.com/Matt Binder, 9 p.m. Eastern time tonight.
Brandon Sutton of the Discourse will be joining everybody in the fun half. But meanwhile, what's going on in the Discourse?
Well, besides SEO problems, as you could imagine, I actually recently got vaccinated, so I've been feeling very docile. So I have a bunch of lukewarm takes that we're going to be presenting on next episode. And we have one of the DC Sentinel Sams coming onto our Twitch channel to game and, just basically talk trash, as the kids say. So,
is it random? Is it sort of a guess which one it's going to be?
Well, I assume they only still have 2 of them. I haven't been keeping up with them. If they're multiplying, I guess we got to roll like a D20 or something to figure out which one. So it's always a guess, I imagine.
And so the 5G is starting to kick in from the vaccine that you got?
I have never gotten better cell phone signal, Sam. Let me tell you, it's outside, inside, in the subway, in some sort of above ground train, if that's such a thing. I get 4 bars, 4 or 5 bars, unlimited data.
Wow, that's pretty good.
If you're in the subway, then that's how you know the microchip's working.
Yeah, the queue when you get down to Canal, you never got better signals ever since It's getting that shot.
That is a
and
notoriously bad subway
that's a bad.
signal
That's
stop.
a bad
Yeah.
signal stop. Matt, new Matt. What's happening in the Matt Leckian media universe?
Yeah, Nando Vila on tonight, 8 Eastern, YouTube Left Reckoning to talk about the collapse of the Super League. And we also have Charmaine Chua and one of the workers who was in Chicago at the Amazon Wildcat strike to talk about organizing in the flexible production era and sort of a fallout from Bessemer and maybe alternative models to try to get some worker power against these behemoths. So check that out tonight, 8 Eastern, patreon.com/Left Reckoning, but go subscribe to the YouTube page, Left Reckoning, folks.
All right. Well, the House has just passed the DC statehood bill. A little breaking news, H.R. 51. We will see what happens in the Senate. I will take leave. These guys will see you in the fun half. 646-257-3920. See you then. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way. Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up. Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up.
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
No, he will not. But Matt, Emma, Brandon, Matt, and Brendan will be with you right now. Oh, how about that? How you doing, everybody?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing good. Just thinking about what Sam said about Chuck Schumer and those bike lanes in Brooklyn. And, you know, it had to come down to what the Baileys in Massapequa, Long Island thought about the bike lanes in Brooklyn, right? That's what how Schumer came down to his decision.
I don't remember that. Enlighten me.
Oh, you guys don't know this story? Schumer has been for years and years and years telling people that every single policy decision that he makes, the way he comes and forms an opinion is that he basically asks an imaginary family that he's called the Baileys, who live in Massapequa, Long Island, what they would think and how it would impact them. And based on that, that's how Chuck Schumer arrives at all of his major decisions.
That's almost just like line for line a bit from that British political show Thick of It with the focus groups, where like there's just like an imaginary like Middle English woman who they get to like decide all their policies, and it just backfires.
Right. And here's an interesting addendum to that story. That's absolutely true. I want to add it's completely real.
No, I believe it. No, 100%.
The family was originally called the O'Malleys, but Schumer updated them with the times and decided that the O'Malleys, I guess, was too Irish and went with the Baileys, which, you know, isn't that much less Irish, but I don't know.
That's
crazy people we have running this country, don't we?
Going from O'Malley to Bailey just seems kind of like a lateral move, if not diagonal, kind of downward, to be honest. But, you know, I'm just looking forward to the day where we can end anti-Irish hatred in America.
Right. Well, that's why Schumer has made this family clearly Irish. He consults on them with all matters of racism, I assume.
I remember the Baileys thing now that you say it. But I did not recognize that it was a 2.0 version and that it used to be O'Malley's. So thank you for enlightening.
Now it's a whole like fake Irish community living on Long Island.
Right. Massapequa too. How weird. Why Massapequa specifically? Pretty random, if you ask me.
Oh, it's like the center of Long Island. It's not along, the North Shore, so it's not as bougie, probably.
Well, you can't ask like a Irish American family from like Pennsylvania or Philadelphia or like Jersey Shore. Like that'd be too again Middle America. So it can only be Martha's Vineyard Irish American family, I suppose.
Well, Schumer had to pick somewhere in New York, obviously, because he's the New York senator. So I mean, he had to determine, I guess, where the most relatable family would live. And I guess, what they say about Long Island, so goes Long Island, so goes the rest of the country. I don't know.
Solely sampling people or fake people from Long Island and Staten Island to get my litmus test for Americans. Well, I'm sorry, not Americans, New Yorkers.
Right. Just really, these people, my God. But anyway.
I still, infamously, I have my cashews during the break. Still in my teeth. So you guys keep talking.
You do realize, Emma, that like anyone who uses their voice professionally for a living, like one of the longest known like tips that you're supposed to not do before like you need to use your voice for your business, your work, is to not eat like nuts. Like that's like actually a real rule that exists.
That is because it's the only thing I can snack quickly that has protein and gives me energy for the rest of the show. So
it's a legit thing. They say if you're a singer or you use your voice professionally, the absolute worst thing you could do before you need to do that is eat some form of nuts.
That really is a huge blow to my whole routine, to be honest with you.
Viewers will be pleased to find out that I am allergic to nuts, so that is not a concern. But Matt is bringing the fun facts this fun half.
I know.
Right. Did you guys? Here's another one, but this one I actually wanted to talk about. Today is the 17th year anniversary of the death of Pat Tillman, and so that you're going to see online all the people who love America and love patriotism talk about Tillman as if he is the quintessential proud patriotic American, flag waving, standing for the anthem, because everyone knows the story about how Pat Tillman was going to get this big NFL contract and he turned it down to go join the military after 9/11. But what they don't know, obviously, is the whole part where he becomes super hateful of what the reason he was there for and becomes completely disillusioned of why he was there and why the country was there and became...
Matt, here's an example of what you're talking about. Here's Bleacher Report today. Pat Tillman left the Arizona Cardinals to enlist in the U.S. Army after 9/11. He turned down a $3.6 million contract offer at 25 years old. Tillman was killed in Afghanistan 17 years ago today. Rest in peace.
Right. Now they leave out that he was killed after becoming very outspoken against the war, and he wasn't killed by Al-Qaeda or the Taliban or whatever. He was killed by friendly fire. The US forces killed Pat Tillman. They say friendly fire. And, the US government tried to cover up the reason behind his death. The family had to fight to find out what happened to Tillman. I remember there's this video out there. I don't know if you guys could quickly find it, of his brother speaking at Tillman's funeral when all these US politicians showed up to talk about Tillman as if he was some great patriotic American hero. And, he is a hero, but not for the ways that they say he's a hero. He spoke out against the war as a US soldier overseas. And, his brother came out and said, this is ridiculous at his funeral. I don't want to put words in his brother's mouth if you could find the video, but he basically said, and also Tillman was an atheist. And you had all these politicians out there saying like, he's, saying all these like positive, optimistic things. He's in heaven or what have you. And, his brother went up there and basically said, no, he's dead.
He was against the war. He said, this war is so effing illegal. He told a friend in 2003. He was a reader of Noam Chomsky. He was opposed to imperialism. He was a liberal and an atheist, and it was those facts were covered up very frequently by the Bush administration.
I feel like they credit like the 9/11 attacks and the sort of fervor for war that people got swept up in after that, for why he enlisted, whether or not that is actually the like literal personal reason he joined or just the reason that they were, touting, as per this. Well, but a lot of people, got caught up in that fervor of the build up to the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. If for no other reason, because military kind of, not the military, but also the media kind of shirked their responsibility of actually fully parsing out the illegality or the shoddy, the shoddy justification for either war, as we were, building our, I guess, patriotism.
Right.
Here's his brother. The brutality of that reality for them.
He was always giving gifts. Thanks, Pat. I didn't write shit, because I'm not a writer. And I just want to say there's a lot of people here, thanks. It was really amazing to be his little baby brother. Yeah, I'm not just gonna sit up here and break down on you, but thank you for coming. Pat's a fucking champion, and always will be. Just make no mistake, he'd want me to say this. He's not with God, he's fucking dead. He's not religious, so thanks for your thoughts, but he's fucking dead. I don't regret any of that.
Yeah,
a far cry from the perception that both the NFL and the U.S. government run by the Bush administration would have wanted to paint at the time. A much more conservative, patriotic, white football player American. Very different in reality of who he was. And his image continues to be, I think, bastardized on a regular basis to this day.
Right. That Bleacher Report tweet, no other information that we just talked about. Just that after joining the military after 9/11 and turning down a big NFL contract, and he was killed in Afghanistan. That's it.
Let's get into this Ben Shapiro clip, shall we?
Let's do it.
Ben Shapiro decided to pull a bit of a stunt in order to support the corporations that are not speaking out against voter suppression, because so many other corporations are falling victim to the woke mob. And he put out a TikTok, which I was unaware that he even understood what that was, but he's trying to be hip and appeal to a new audience. Here's Ben Shapiro on TikTok.
Here we are at Home Depot. As you know, controversy has now involved Home Depot as people are encouraging people to boycott Home Depot because Home Depot is not getting involved in Georgia's voter law controversy. Home Depot is doing exactly the right thing because, after all, they are in fact Home Depot. They are not in fact.
How many times is Ben Shapiro going to say Home Depot?
Buying from companies that are not falling to the woke left. Home Depot, so far, is one of those companies. So here's what we're doing. And I encourage you to do the same. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to buy some stuff, and then I'm going to leave. All right, as you can see, I just went shopping at Home Depot. You should do the same. This wood, this board, this magnificent piece of poplar is now mine.
Okay, I'm sorry, that's Instagram, but it had a lot of the TikTok trappings. And so, I mean, like, he's just gonna walk out with a piece of wood, and that's it. And he had to put it in one of the shopping bags, so he had the handles to hold it. I mean, buy something you're gonna use functionally, Ben Shapiro, because I don't really know what he's gonna do with that piece of wood.
Well, I mean, first he had to get the bag so he could prove that he bought it. You know, that's why he has the receipt in hand. He has the receipt to show you that he purchased this. I can only assume how much money is that in wood, like $5 to $10, depending on where you buy it, worth of wood, if that. So, you know, really keeping them afloat. If everyone goes to Home Depot and buys a single shelf worth of wood, you know, we can really keep things going.
I don't understand. Sam made this point, like, they don't sell lumber like that. That's like a remaindered piece that he probably got off of some pile, because it's usually like multiple feet long, not just one shelf. Because what could you possibly do with that besides put it on a couple cinder blocks and make a shelf with it?
That's the best thing about Ben Shapiro whenever he pulls one of these, like, you know, stunts, is that he gets insecure and has to come up with a reason for why it makes sense later. So he's going to come up with some lie to justify why he needed that specific cut of wood. Like, you know, maybe he's, you know, building a shelf.
He needed it for his karate class.
Oh, absolutely. I hope he breaks it live on air.
Oh, man.
I mean,
he should be challenged to break that with his arm.
We talk about, like, you know, anti-Semitism on the right, but like I feel like this is the most anti-Semitic clip from the right that I've ever seen. He's promoting a boycott for Home Depot, and he buys a single piece of wood.
But you can't see. You know, the perspective for Ben Shapiro's videos are always off because of like his size. So that's really actually just a toothpick in a Home Depot bag. It's just with the proportions. Have you ever seen The Borrowers, the movie? You know, the 1992 classic. I just threw a year out. It's probably not from that year, but yeah, no, it's like that.
Just really unbelievable. Also, I don't get why people use that Instagram functionality that way, because it always does that. Stop after, like, what is it, like 20 seconds, 10 seconds, 15, whatever it is, and you always lose something. Like, well, stop using things that way. That's not what that feature on Instagram is used for.
I liked his little like PBS documentary. I don't know if you inserted that or that was his own thing where he inserted the little like Home Depot through the ages.
I didn't get that. Was that an attempt to be funny? Because that really annoyed me, actually.
Yeah,
you never really know with Ben Shapiro what's an attempt to be funny and what's just, you know, pure unadulterated earnestness. But
it would have been funnier if you actually saw Ben Shapiro like around the cull lumber pile at Home Depot shopping for a piece of poplar.
Yes.
That actually would have been a lot funnier than old stock footage of Home Depot.
Also, I'm pretty sure you can just like film a video in Home Depot. I don't know why he didn't just film himself going around the store looking for wood. There definitely are
exactly
of him doing that and looking like a fool, like not knowing what to buy.
It was just embarrassing. Yeah.
Right, we don't know he went in there. So for all we know, he handed a intern some cash, had the intern run in there, run out with that piece of wood, and hand it to Shapiro for the rest of the video.
I just feel, you know, like you go into Home Depot, you're trying to prove a point, you walk out with a power drill. That's just like
exactly
easy squeezy lemon peasy. You're a big man, you got a power tool.
Well, that's too heavy for Ben.
Probably, and also a little expensive.
You know, he'll just pay one of the workers there to bring it out to your truck or whatever. He did buy a truck. Yeah, that's right. But you got to buy some kind of equipment, like the table saw that like stops when your finger touches the blade or something.
I'm gonna go
make a big purchase.
I'm gonna go to Lowe's and support their boycott of the Georgia laws by buying a single pack of, like, I don't know, pea seeds from the Home and Garden Center, and
it shows how much
experience.
Yeah, it shows how much he cares. It just buys one piece of like $8 wood.
Well, Republicans do this stuff so often that if they actually bought expensive things every time they like had to buy or slash burn things, they would run out of money very quickly. You know, they're always burning Nikes or buying, you know, Vitamix blenders or burning like cans of beans or like, you know, buying cans of beans. And so you got to like keep things cheap. You have to have a budget for this kind of stuff, I imagine.
Also, they accidentally sign up for recurring monthly payments of hundreds and hundreds of dollars to the Trump PACs. So, you know, those sort of things really run them dry after a while.
I do that too, but with like streaming services.
Well, at least you get something out of that.
A lot of Naked and Afraid episodes.
All right, you guys want to go to the phones?
Sure thing.
All right. And Emma, you probably thought of TikTok and Ben Shapiro being on TikTok because I hear that a couple months ago, Matt Gaetz was really recommending conservatives start using TikTok more.
Well, it's just the aesthetic of that Instagram.
You didn't get what I was.
No,
okay.
I don't.
Matt Gaetz. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I also didn't get it.
I just thought that was genuinely. I thought it was actual. I didn't think it was a joke. I thought Gaetz actually was in between showing, you know, pictures of his conquest, was saying, "Hey, by the way, join TikTok."
I was gonna say, yeah.
Yeah, it didn't seem like a joke. It just seemed like
I guess there
news
you go.
peg.
Let's go to the phones. 240. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, is this me?
This is you. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm Andrea from North Carolina.
Hi, Andrea from North Carolina. What would you like to talk about today?
Well, there was this big news story yesterday in my small town in North Carolina known as Elizabeth City. Out-of-town police came in to serve a search warrant, ended up shooting and killing someone while they were trying to drive their child to school. And now everyone is shutting down all public comments. They're not releasing any body camera footage. And there's going to be a lot of demonstrations. There was some yesterday, and I'm down to talk about that. And there's going to be some more tonight as well.
So, this is going to sound, you know, this is where we are in the world today. Which police killing is this one? I feel like I've heard
of the
this
murder.
one.
This is the murder of Andrew Brown Jr.
Okay. And they're not releasing anything.
Yes, we initially gathered at the city hall where they were doing some emergency session yesterday, and we were going to go in and demand that they release the footage, but they closed the city hall and wouldn't take any questions. And then basically they just shut everything down. There was a bunch of state troopers coming in. I saw federal, FBI was there. There were a lot of unmarked vehicles. It seemed like just police were flooding into the city, and they just wouldn't take any questions. No one would answer phone calls about anything in relation to the shooting.
And how big were the protests? Was there, what was going on the ground there?
Well, we're a small town in North Carolina. We're about like 20,000 population, and that's rounding up. And so we had initially a couple hundred show up at around 6 p.m. And over the course of the night, we were just marching through the city, setting, like, there's basically two major roads in our town. And so we would march back and forth and shut both of them down. And basically spread awareness that, hey, cops came into our city and just shot someone dead. And, people would show up in like cars and stuff and like ask what's going on, and we would tell people. But we had probably at peak, maybe around 300, maybe 400 people. And again, that's a lot considering how small the town is. So it was a pretty big showing, actually.
Do we know why because you said that he was driving his children to school, right? Do we know why the cops even pulled him over to begin with?
Oh, well, to my understanding, and again, the details are really sparse, but I spoke to some witnesses, and they said that they were trying to serve a search warrant, and that is, in stark contrast to an arrest warrant, but they were trying to serve a search warrant. And I guess they drove onto the street as he was getting into his car with his kid, and they just figured, oh, this guy's trying to flee. Let's shoot the car in broad daylight. and there was also like kids playing outside. It was a whole big thing.
Right.
And so like they shot the car crashed into a tree. It was a whole like, and to my understanding, after talking to some witnesses, they let his body just lay on the ground for several hours. And it was just like ridiculous.
And there's body camera footage. I'm reading this NPR article right now that needs to be released, but there will be, presumably, unless just by, coincidence, these cops didn't turn their body cameras on. I would imagine we may be getting some of that soon, correct?
Yeah, we're going to be shutting down the major roads in the city every day until that body camera footage is released. And so I'm going to go there, and I'm going to be, live. I'm not going to live stream it, but I'm going to capture some stuff. I'm going to try to interview some people, and I'm going to try to cover the as much as I can of what's going on.
Good, right. Was there any violence yesterday? And by violence, I mean, how did the cops treat the protesters? How much tear gas, flying batons, et cetera, et cetera?
There was actually no interactions between the police and the protesters at all. Most of them were just driving around in cars and trying to like corral us and like block off like areas that we could go, and we would just like go past the cars and then more cars. Like I said, like we're in a small town, and so like there were way more cop cars than I've ever seen, just ever. And they kept coming out. A lot of them were unmarked as well, like not marked as police, but they have little sirens on. And they just basically just followed us around the city, just trying to like trap us in spaces. But outside of that, there was really no interactions. There was no violence whatsoever on any side, either the protesters or the police. But I don't know if that's going to change tonight. I don't know if that's only, yesterday, because they don't know how to, I don't know exactly what's going on. But this is a small town. So that's something to keep in mind, is that a lot of the cops are part of the community, but then also the cops that served the search warrant are out of town. Those are not city police officers. They came in from a neighboring county for whatever reason.
Well, Andrea, definitely keep us updated with the situation there at this store. I mean, the idea that, obviously the whole thing from the top to the bottom sounds suspect, to say the least, but the idea that with kids there, you would even try to do something like that, apprehend or serve someone, just
like
we've seen that also. I mean, I guess that doesn't even matter though, being that the cops have no problem shooting kids as 15-year-olds in the chest 4 times, or a 13-year-old shooting them after the 13-year-old is complying with the request to raise their hands in the air. I mean, so I guess it's not that out of the ordinary.
Well, yeah, and also I think goes
to show.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing.
No, and I was just going to say, I think it also goes to show that a lot of declarations being made, about America being able to breathe now with the conviction of Derek Chauvin's murderer, just shows that, no, because the problem is systemic. These things are still happening in parallel in different parts of the country. And the police, regardless of whether or not they are saying they're afraid that they're going to be put under the thumb of some sort of new regulatory system that they were previously unsubject to, are still going about their business as usual. And their business as usual is killing people while serving routine search warrants, theoretically.
Right. Yeah. Anyone who thinks Derek Chauvin getting convicted means that things have changed or justice has been served, or we'll be seeing some sort of different outcomes in the future, you're going to be sadly mistaken. I mean, if anything, I think, Chauvin is an outlier in so many ways, especially being that, thanks to that 17-year-old girl who took the video, people saw this guy with his knee on George Floyd for 9 minutes, right? I mean, we don't have that in all these other cases. Yeah, and people love to give the benefit of the doubt to police, and in most of these situations, it is just a cop deciding to shoot someone, and people just chalking it up to, well, he had to make a split minute decision. And this is an outlier in that way, the Chauvin case, where it clearly was an elongated thing.
And to your point, Matt, too, in these cases, we have, body cams that are theoretically on the cop, and that footage is being kept from us in the same way it's often kept from us until the story is gotten straight, right? By the cops, by the prosecutors in line with the cops, by the various sort of stakeholders who have, reason to be on the side of the police in this case, where in the case of, the murder of George Floyd, if we don't have an independent bystander filming as well, the body cams don't often make the difference. Like we have to have these independent verification systems, and body cams were initially and are still by main reformists touted as the or rather a substantial part of the solution to the problem of police brutality.
Right. Oh, Andrew's still on the line. Thank you for the call, Andrew. Definitely call back in anytime, but definitely if there's any updates to what's going on there.
Yeah, thank you. And I do a show every morning, and so I'll be doing routine updates on my show. It's called Above It All. Check it out, folks.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, y'all have a good one.
You too.
What was I gonna say? Oh, I was gonna say, where did it like when this body cam footage is taken? Like when something happens, where does it go? Like do the cops just have the raw access, right? Like are we like it feels like, I don't know, maybe this is how it works, I don't know, but it feels like there should be an independent body that has the access to this footage instead of us just getting in whatever edited version the police want to make public.
Well, they just did this with the Bryant shooting, Ma'Khia Bryant, from the other day. I mean, they released the footage or portions of it in order to get ahead of the story. And so,
well, they think in that case, though, the police, I really do think this, and I don't think it's shocking that I think this, but the police in this case feel that it was 100% justified. So that's why they've got no problem releasing that footage, because they feel like they're getting ahead of something and nipping it in the bud.
And to your point, it gives them like a card to play. Like if they can decide when or whether or not to release things at all, right? Like we're only going to release it if it's advantageous for us. If not, we'll just hold it until things die down a little.
Right, that's a great point. Look how quickly that footage came out. What was it, the same day that the news about the shooting came out? We literally have the body cam footage, but in these other cases, we have to wait, and in many instances, have to hit the streets and protest, demanding the body cam footage be released. I mean, they 100% think that one's justified because the girl had a knife in her hand. Obviously, that means you can shoot her in the chest 4 times. I mean, just so, but that's what they think. That's why they released that footage so quickly.
But I mean, I think that goes to your point. The bar is so low in America that, yeah, like they are able to release footage that theoretically in their minds and in the minds of a large portion of our public justifies the sort of summary execution of suspected criminal, let's say in the best case scenario, where in other countries that's just not routine either. In other countries they don't have cops summarily executing people for fleeing the scene of a search warrant. At least not the numbers that we have here. And so, like,
countries, they don't even allow their police officers to walk the streets with guns.
Well, I mean, in some countries they do, and in some countries they have like special SWAT teams, and so like, yeah, police kill people in other countries, but we've gotten to the point where, like, yeah, there are so many, I think, clear cases where the police should not be executing somebody because they're like just reading a book, walking down the street, that like I think we've begun to kind of, and maybe the police have begun to recognize that we accept that they execute a large number of quote unquote criminals for crimes that don't come with the punishment for execution. Like, resisting arrest, people get executed for that all the time. And they'll for sure, release the body cam footage, to your point, of a, suspect resisting a little too hard. And it's like, okay, but, they manage to subdue people who are resisting arrest in other countries all the time. It's only in America where that's like sort of even minor justification to a part of the population.
Yeah, and just going back to the body camera conversation, right? So the Bryant shooting, they released it right afterwards. Felt they were justified because she had a knife, right? But compare that to the Adam Toledo shooting in Chicago, where, I mean, that footage may have not even seen the light of day, but it seemed like Lori Lightfoot and her office wanted to get ahead of it at least. But that happened, the shooting in in March 29th, so a few weeks ago. And so they weren't voluntarily putting that information or that footage out to the press. They were going to bury it unless a few people wanted to get out ahead of it, and they made a calculated PR decision, both Lori Lightfoot's administration and, you know, the police department. So that's, I think, a good contrast, those two cases.
And just a note, just on riots, like when police do just kill people in the street, regardless of, you know, what the situation is, there are riots. I was in London in 2011 when the Tottenham Riots happened, when a guy was shot dead by the police when they were trying to arrest him. Like this sort of rage that people try to act like it's like, frankly, I think Americans are more inured to it than other places, because like the UK, like Tottenham, those riots were insane when I was there. It was like the entire city going up, and they have a lot less police killing there than we do here.
Yeah, I mean, in the situation with Lori Lightfoot, I remember hearing about this police shooting of Adam Toledo, and they were trying to make it about the narrative right after this happened was about we have to do something about who got this gun in the hands of a 13-year-old, as if that was the main takeaway. And then once it became clear that the footage was going to come out and be released to the public after weeks since the killing happened, Lori Lightfoot then came out that day, and all of a sudden the conversation was about, I've seen the footage and it's bad. We gotta do something about this. Like, it was a complete change of the narrative once they discovered that, hey, we gotta actually release this to the public, and they're gonna see what happened.
Oh yeah, no, cops lie all the time. That should be a given, and that's why independent verification of, independent filming of these events is so important. Because if nothing else, like Emma was saying, the timing they released it is always going to be strategic. Whether or not it is later, sooner, it's always going to be to serve the benefit of the, you know, the police, or, you know, whatever that narrative may be. And, you know, in these circumstances, I think that Matt is also correct, where we've just been completely immunized to the loss of American life, whether it's mass shootings in the form of, you know, school, workplace, suicides, etc., or just the police executing people in the street. We've just, I think as a country, have accepted that part of being American means that a lot of people are going to die unnecessarily. And, you know, the COVID-19 is simply another example of that.
Right.
Absolutely.
Emma, you had some clips you wanted to get to?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So let's start with this Cuba one, because I think it's an interesting conversation. The Biden administration is signaling that they're going to be more conservative in their foreign policy towards Cuba than even Obama was, who had made an effort to normalize relations with Cuba until Trump came in and scrapped that as well. But I think this State Department spokesperson and his rhetoric here is a good indicator of how the Biden administration and Tony Blinken, as Secretary of State, has really been center-right in their approach thus far when it comes to foreign policy relative to U.S. politics. And here's the State Department spokesperson talking about supporting democracy in Cuba while still maintaining historical posture, the United States' historical posture in the region.
What I would say is, of course, it is for the Cuban people to speak to the results of the Cuban Party Congress. We have spoken about our review of our Cuba policy, which remains ongoing. But we know, of course, that will be governed by two principles. First, support for democracy and human rights will be at the core of those efforts. And we will seek to empower the Cuban people to determine their own future. And second, Americans, as we've said, tend to be the best ambassadors for freedom in Cuba. Don't have anything to add about the change that has been announced. Again, it's for the Cuban people to speak to the results of their party Congress.
So the United States is the best ambassador, and historically has been the best ambassador for determining democracy in Cuba, he says on one side of his mouth, which is hilarious in and of itself.
A menacing, just horrible statement.
Exactly. But at the same time, it's up to the Cuban, they want to promote democracy in Cuba. So which one is it? Is the United States determining what we're calling democracy in Cuba? Or is it up to the Cuban people to decide what they want? Because for decades now, the Cuban people have spoken about who they want in power, but the United States just doesn't like that.
Yeah, I mean, I really hate this administration's foreign policy, and I just think it is like, it's not improved. It's just menacing, and it's the big stick, and it's like, I don't know, it's insulting. It's like, we're a country that had our CIA for decades try to figure out how to kill Castro. And who, by the way, didn't like come up just being a like communist. The revolution against Batista wasn't just simply a communist revolution. It had obviously, like, our foreign policy pushed them towards that, because basically, like, they didn't want to play by our rules. And in a polar world with like the Cold War, I mean, I think they picked the right side, Cuba did, because I think America was, I don't know, I don't want to go on about that, but it's just really disgusting, like, to have had official programs to try to kill their leader. And yeah, we're going to help them. We're here for democracy. Okay.
Well, they're letting the Cuban people choose, but they're going to put a gun to their head if they make the wrong choice.
And also, like, blockade them and, not have regular trade relations. I'm sure like the Cuban people love that stuff too.
It's just go ahead.
That they haven't even just quickly. I mean, the fact that the Biden administration has not even begun to. I mean, they're trying to begin the same talks with Iran that the Obama administration left, but the fact that they aren't doing so with Cuba just says so much about this kind of like fear of right-wing reaction that we're seeing along with immigration as well. I mean, it's the side of the same token.
I think it's also just there's a bipartisan consensus on anti-communism still. It still exists.
Yeah.
And I was just going to say, it's amazing how little Americans must know about, like, Americans, American history, as well as Cuban history and the intersections, to allow someone to make that kind of statement and have anyone just like not laugh out loud. Like, every part of that was just so like blatantly false. And, the portrayal of Cuba as this, the continual portrayal of Cuba as this sort of like uniquely like North Korea, Iran, in, forgetting the problems with that esque threat is just so antiquated, and Americans still sort of engaging in it seems so backwards, especially when you consider, not to be all reality television guy but on The Amazing Race Australia, they go to Cuba. Like, the contestants go to Cuba and they have legs of the race in Cuba and do things in Cuba, and they go like, oh, Cuba, and they're like, oh, Cuba's so nice, and this is just the normal country. And they don't say that because they're not from America, but to imagine an American team going to Cuba on The Amazing Race is just so far outside of the realm of possibility. And it's because, it's still clinging to this last bastion of, Cold War nostalgia that appeals to a handful of, Republican voters in Florida, Cuban expats, and that's it. And everyone else is just sort of held hostage to it.
And I think you can add speaking of Miami, like the Latin American oligarchy at large, I feel like we're almost like, our foreign policy it's kind of like the war on drugs, right? Like, a lot of these countries are more extremely reactionary than we are, if you can believe it. And we can't move too far ahead of them on these issues.
If you ever talk to anyone like who isn't American about Cuba, they visited it years ago as if it was just another country. There's nothing crazy to go to Cuba like it was where Obama needed to come and say that you can travel to Cuba again, and then Trump comes and takes that back away from Americans. Like, anyone outside of America, people are just like, oh yeah, Cuba's a beautiful place, I've been there. Nothing crazy about it. Nothing, wow, I went to Cuba, like it's some like crazy locale due to the politics of the whole situation.
It just feels like they have to hide how nice Cuba is from Americans, because otherwise you would make direct comparisons between Cuba and places like, Haiti and places like Jamaica that have had direct American interference and direct sort of like Western ally interference. And it's like night and day in terms of like quality of life, in terms of like poverty rate, in terms of literacy rate, in terms of all these standards of living. But of course, we can't talk about that.
Right, because people here actually don't know that. They don't think that at all. They think Cuba is some sort of like desolate place, and everyone there is like uneducated, and that they don't know what they're talking. That they're poor, living in poverty, like abject poverty, and it's just like they have no idea.
I love the coexistence of our idea of like the sort of austere Cuban modes of production, and also, we all like to smuggle their cigars into our luggage when we travel there or to a place where we can buy them. Interesting.
Yeah, it's incredibly dangerous, which is why Canadians vacation there on a regular basis. But and just to, I guess, put a button on it, just these are the same exact talking points that we've seen now out of this administration when it comes to Bolivia, when it comes to Venezuela. This is a larger South American posture, or like the Americas posture, North America and South America, when it comes to old school relations with these countries. They're going to take us back to the 90s and 80s, and this and immigration, Biden has completely failed, and thus far, in my view, and I think we should be talking about it even more than we are.
Oh, America first, baby. I mean, it's not the same thing, but when it comes to foreign policy, it really does feel that way. When you look at where he stands on a lot of domestic policies and then where he stands on foreign policy, it's, it is that in some ways.
I think you can draw direct parallels, especially when it comes to like between his foreign policy and his, views on policing in America. Those are, I think, the two things that he's been very clear. He has a very, very old-fashioned, very, very 90s, one might say architect of the prison industrial complexy views on like the role of law enforcement, broadly speaking, in the world. And I think that there is an impulse to treat the two as though, the two being like domestic law enforcement and sort of the global geopolitical sort of, military presence that America keeps, as though they are separate, discrete things. But no, I mean, I think it's just part of a general worldview that he and a lot of people have around, especially, neoconservatives have about what it means to be the president, what it means for America to be safe, what it means for Americans to be safe. And part of that means there has to be an occupation of populations, both at home and abroad. Maybe we shouldn't be gunning Black people down in the streets at home, but they should be shot in the leg. Maybe we shouldn't be dropping 20 million drone strikes on Iran, but we should be dropping 10 million. Then that's just part of his baked in worldview.
Right. Emma, there was another clip you wanted to get to, right?
Yep, absolutely. So Kyrsten Sinema, she is one of the key figures in whether or not one amend the filibuster at all, which both her and Joe Manchin are now signaling that they're not going to, which means that the Biden administration is going to be significantly hampered on important priorities, including the PRO Act, which would be a huge step forward for the labor movement, or a significant one in this country. But she showed her true colors a little too much in a clip that was uncovered by More Perfect Union, where she showed who she truly serves and who she's truly interested in pandering to. And hint, it's not workers.
There is some concern right now in the business community, as you've probably heard, an issue that our friends at the Arizona chapter of the Associated General Contractors wanted me to bring up with you, that there's a bill that passed the House, the PRO Act. Give us a sense, as this bill makes its way to the Senate, where you intend to be on this. We know it's an evolving issue, and if you'd be willing to have a discussion with employers in Arizona about our concerns about this bill being a disruption to the workplace and to our business environment.
Pause it for a second. Pause it for 1 second.
Business environment.
Yeah, so this is a leaked clip from the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, which is why this presenter is phrasing it in this way. So 1, she's speaking to the Arizona Chamber of Commerce. 2, they are phrasing it like, how is this going to hurt business owners? because they are all a part of that.
This business environment where people don't have union protections. I like that. I love that business environment.
I like this a public access television studio they have going on though. It's very nice.
In Arizona about our concerns about this bill being a disruption to the workplace and to our business environment.
Well, I would welcome such a discussion. As folks who are listening today know, the way I make decisions on behalf of Arizona and for our constituents is by listening to the business leaders who will be impacted by these decisions. So I want to discuss this legislation, and I want to know the impact it would have on Arizona jobs and the economy. Now, there hasn't been any movement on the PRO Act yet in the United States Senate, but I can tell you that many Arizona businesses have already reached out to my office, and I know have discussed the concerns that they have with the PRO Act with some of the folks who are on our call today. Now, right now, this legislation is not scheduled to come before the full Senate, but we are watching carefully because some of the PRO Act provisions, especially in regards to the worker classification test for independent contractors, could become a part of other legislative ideas. So I would ask all the members who are joining us today to please stay involved with my office and help me by sharing information about how this would impact you and your company so that I can go back to Senate leadership and folks on both sides of the aisle to discuss the concerns that Arizona businesses have.
Stay very involved in my office. That means send me money. The quote is, the way I make decisions on behalf of Arizona and for our constituents is by listening to the business leaders, period. There you go. And then the independent contractor aspect, that's, God forbid that we use people's labor and give them any benefits or protections as a part of their employment. But I'm going to open it up to you guys. I mean, there was so much there.
I think that she should.
Business leaders, amazing. I mean, saying the quiet part out loud, right? I mean, it's not shocking that that's what they do, but it is amazing to hear them just openly say it when they're in a room with friendly faces, right?
I just think that she should have done a Chuck Schumer and just go like, hey, when I'm deciding what's best for Arizona, I think about a fake Italian American family in like Phoenix, Arizona, who runs a small business. And I say, I can't think of a traditional Italian name right now, so I won't, because it'd just be offensive. But, and I don't know. I've had my hard time like wrapping my head around Kirsten Sinema. In terms of the fact that I see her in the news every other week, doing something terrible, and it seems as though Democratic Party specifically, maybe more so than Republican Party, but maybe this is just generally true about our politics now, and the wave of AOC, or rather after AOC has ushered in this wave of like people who just want to be Instagram star politicians, like Dan Crenshaw. And, every other week we just have another, like these 5 Republican, junior senators are going to be the squad of the Republicans. Like they're just all trying to recreate that magic. And, I don't know. I just feel like this is another run-of-the-mill bit, like Democratic, conservative Democratic business person. I mean, another conservative Democratic politician who is being wrapped up in this sort of new wave of kind of like young, hip millennial branding. And other than that, it's sort of like and it's all very vapid.
You're saying you're not impressed by her pink wigs and her colorful glasses and,
It's like John McCain was like reincarnated as like an Instagram person,
she's like a Hello Kitty person. She's Hello Kitty mixed with John McCain. There you go.
I'm always so baffled by people, and it's a very small group of people, because obviously it's not the what most of these types subscribe to. But I'm always baffled by anyone who dresses in any sort of alternative way, people who are into like subcultures, like any of those people who ascribe to conservative politics, whether it be economics or social issues, baffling to me. It's like, where did you just pick up this? You just found these clothes in like a magazine and thought you'd go out and buy them? Like, Like, I don't understand like what's going on here. Like, if there was like a Republican congressperson walking around with like a mohawk and like punk leather jacket, studded leather jacket, I'd be like, where's this guy? What's going on here? Where did you have you listened to the lyrics of any of those bands patched onto your jacket? What's going on here? It's like always baffling to me. And her aesthetic is so odd to me. I would love to know the story of where she decided that's who she was visually, aesthetically.
It's called the 90s, I think.
But not even really. Like, she's
Actually 2000s, I think. That's squarely 2000s.
I don't mind it because, late 90s, early 2000s aesthetic is my favorite nightmare. But I think that people are focused. I mean, why I brought it up is because there's this kind of whole conversation going on around about the trajectory of her politics, right? Which I would, I guess, include her aesthetic into sort of loosely, which is that she started off with, maybe a PhD in justice studies and like a Maoist kind of like Van Jones. And now she's, giving talks in front of the Arizona Chamber of Commerce about how small business leaders are the backbone of America and need to, be incentivized to, et cetera, et cetera. And, there are just two versions of that, of how we got to this point, or how she got to this point. That aesthetic that, including the ideology is all a facade to better infiltrate the Democratic Party in order to, blue dog and sell out to corporations, which is possible. Or, it's a cautionary tale about working within the Democratic Party, and like the fact that unless you are wary about the ability for that machine to influence their own ideology and shape you to fit what it wants, you might end up like keeping the aesthetic components of leftism and but still giving these kind of talks in front of the Chamber of Commerce.
Right. You know what her aesthetic reminds me of? It's turf aesthetic. That's sort of third wave feminists who hate transgender people, but still, act like there's some sort of radical, like riot girl-esque, like that's totally her aesthetic. It's like the turf aesthetic.
Let me tell you something, Matt, there's nothing radical about trans exclusion.
Yeah.
Let's keep that straight.
Of course not.
Just like this kind of, corporate feminist, like, I'm sure that she's read Lean In 400 times. That's for her.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I was actually just thinking of like how to make $1 million the quickest way. And I guess this is also related to like Democrats selling out. And I wish I had gotten it on the ground floor of like those post Lean In books that were just like written, you know what I'm talking about, like, how to be a bad bitch at the office and a, bad bitch in the streets or whatever. I don't know, you know what I'm talking about. And if I could have just gotten in on the ground floor of that and had like a foreword by like Lizzo and get a co-writing by like, I don't know, Tina Fey and RBG, before she died, I wouldn't be here right now. That because that was the only book I saw on people's bookshelves for just like years. It would just be like Lean In, and then like book by Amy Schumer, book by Tina Fey, book by, I guess, Ricky Gervais, like comedians writing books about how to be like aggressive at the office.
And Del Rope.
Kristen Sinema, speaking of books, is also an author herself, including of a title such as Who Must Die in Rwanda's Genocide, The State of Exception Realized, like academic publishing, which is also a very bizarre and strange part of her bibliography and biography.
Yeah, her whole, everyone knows the story about where she was like a Green Party activist. I remember hearing her name years and years and years ago when she was a Green Party person, and it's just bizarre to think that I'd be hearing that same name.
I see all this stuff
years later.
Yeah, you see all that, and then you see the way that she did the thumbs down and then the fuck off ring. And I'll just say I'm not a psychiatrist, but the word sociopath comes to my mind. But that's just me.
I know I've said that. I thought I might have gone too far with the sociopath comment, but thank you for validating that, Matt.
Yeah, I think that's just too interesting for most of these people. I think, everyone reads American Psycho and then they, think that they're a sociopath or like a narcissist. And then, most people actually aren't that interesting. I think a lot of times it's just, we live in a society that is very easy for people to mimic sociopathic tendencies because you're just taught not to care about a lot of people. Like, it's very easy to put yourself in a silo, which doesn't exclude exclude any possible mental issues anyone might have, but it's very easy to put yourself in a silo and convince yourself that you have empathy in the United States for everybody by just caring about a very specific group of people. It's very easy to, like, pretend like you care about the world, and by the world you mean, a fake Italian family in a suburb of Phoenix who owns a small business.
Right. Should we take one more call?
Let's go.
All right, let's go back to the phones. Let me see. Oh, and there was someone who I was told to look out for their number here. Let's see. 416. What's your name? Where are you calling from? 416. What's your name? Where are you calling from? You're on the line. I'm gonna give you a second to realize, and then I gotta let you go. Oh well. All right, let's go to one more call then. Let's go to 702. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Matt. Hey, Emma. Hey, Brandon. It's Bro Flamingo from Las Vegas.
Hey, Bro Flamingo.
Hey.
Hey.
What would you like to talk
big
about?
fan. A couple of things. First, I guess the most obvious thing is the Derek Chauvin. I'm happy about it, but then we had like 2 other police killings happen right after the verdict, and it just goes to show that a lot of work has to be done. But I do think like the cynical take is like, look, they knew. The cynical take is like, look, they knew. I mean, the guy was obviously guilty, right? But they also knew, like, hey, we're gonna sacrifice this guy to the wolves, because at the end of the day, you know what I'm saying, like, there's a lot of pressure on this, but at the same time, like all you guys were saying, is to placate the public. And I think that the system has to be, like, not abolished, but or even reformed, but it's just based on white supremacy. And that's the problem. And I think a lot of these police departments are just white supremacist factories at this point, like literally just turning out white supremacists, even if it's quote unquote good cops, but they're usually murdered, turned away, fired, demoted, whatever, blah, blah, blah. People who go in there, they come out with these racist attitudes. And even in the 2006 FBI report, they talked about how white supremacists are infiltrating these police departments. I just think at the end of the day, like, when I called in last time, Matt, I talked about a denazification program, but there's got to be something, or like a task force or something, to really start rooting out like the white supremacist problem in this country. Like, I'm no sociology expert or anything, but I mean, at the core of every leftist thing that we want to, every leftist agenda that we want to do, white supremacy stands at the core of the problem, at least in the context of America. And I think the police is at the crossroads of many of these things, because it's just like, especially police unions, by the way, police unions are just nothing but like criminal enterprises at this point. But these like, basically these police departments are literally just like right-wing radical, like a radical terrorist centers, in my opinion, in ostensibly blue states. You get what I'm saying? And these things really have to be dismantled at some point, because let's just be honest. Like, I think, let's just be honest. It's like at the heart of these things, it's not about police reform. It's not about, more training. It really is just racism. It really is just stone cold racism. At least other systems in our country can hide moral relativism and situational ethics, but at the police department, it's really just stone cold racism, and the justice system. By the way, it's a color coded justice system. Your thoughts, guys?
No, that's absolutely spot on. I don't want to interrupt you, actually, because you were on a roll there. I mean, there's so much to unpack there, honestly, because you do have at its core a lot of law enforcement is made up of white supremacists, open white supremacists. I'm not even talking about, like, because this is a whole other aspect of, when people think of white supremacy, a lot of people in this country think like, the KKK or skinheads, they have to be sig hailing through the streets or something, or they need the tattoos or something. No, like, You don't have to be an active member of some sort of white supremacist organization to be a white supremacist or even to uphold white supremacy. But that I feel like I don't even want to take away from the fact that there are, though, many people in law enforcement who are exactly where I described, the racist skinheads, the KKK type members. It's bad. And I mean, we've seen that this is not just law enforcement, this is in our military as well. I mean, there would be a huge, and this would be good, obviously, but if you would to fire every like white supremacist in law enforcement, you would like the numbers would be hit. Like it wouldn't be like such a small percentage that like there wouldn't be that much of a big difference. Like I think you'd have police like departments across this country completely like decimated, honestly.
Right, and also one more thing, and I'll jump. Brandon actually brought up something very, very interesting. We made the parallel between law enforcement and kind of our foreign policy. And I'd like you guys to unpack this, because what I was thinking when he was talking about that was, along with the foreign policy, I think the foreign policy leg kind of got cut out first, where there's almost no more organic constituency for these foreign adventures anymore. It's really been kind of hollowed out. It's been exposed. It's been discredited. But there's still this vocal, powerful elite that kind of upholds this foreign policy leg. But it's just thoroughly unpopular. I feel like the same thing is happening with the police, where there's almost no organic. I remember back in 2014, 2015, I had to fight every Back to Blue crash dummy on my timeline. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, holy shit, what the fuck? Sorry. What is this about? However, but I feel like even now, just the broader support for the police is just gone. It's nothing but, there's no organic constituencies. It's just a bunch of just white supremacists, own the lid types, alt-right groypers, whatever. You understand what I'm saying? I feel like they're kind of organic kind of vanished too. Anyways, guys, I love what you guys do. Left is best. Take care, Brandon. Take care of everybody. Take
care. Great call. Great call.
Thank you for the call.
Sometimes there's those calls where it's just like, you gotta let the caller talk, because they're on a roll. They got points to make, and that was one of them. I love those calls.
Well, I mean, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, just to touch on his last point, I think he's right in drawing the parallels between the sort of constituency that exists for our forever wars at home and also abroad. I think the constituency for like the war in Iraq and the war on terror, it waned away. Under the Bush era, after the Iraq War, went on forever. After it wasn't, a quick and easy war that had us, lauded as like liberators. And, we never saw any real consequences for that, because the Obama administration kind of like whitewashed over the whole event. And so it seems easy to believe that wars are popular here. But no, I mean, even Trump rode in the Republican primary on a wave of sort of like Iraq regret. Iraq and Afghanistan, and just general like wasteful spending regret that he tapped into in the Republican Party as well. It's just oftentimes that kind of pro-jingoistic, pro-imperialistic take is put in a black box, because like the politicians and their funders agree with it. So we don't often have the ability to disagree with it, directly on legitimized political media platforms, because it's assumed that we have to have a kinetic military, because that's the only way to keep America safe. The only way to keep America safe is to have military bases in every other country in the world, which is uniquely American. In terms of the police constituency, I think it's important to remember that the underlying logic of the police for most Americans is not that they need police in their communities to protect them from something, but that there is a community out there that needs police in it to keep them safe from the other, to keep them safe from the others. Most people in America don't want to be policed personally. And it just so happens that some people aren't subject to direct policing very often. And so now what it seems like, maybe policing is waning in popularity. It's going to wax and wane as, BLM becomes covered in more by the media and becomes covered less by the media, as, things like that occur. But I think that what people are being presented with a lot more than they used to is the direct reality that policing is something different than what they believed prior to, last summer, if that was their wake-up call, or the summer before that, or any number of these incidents that keep occurring. Because now it's like, now policing is not a thing that happens somewhere else and, to keep me safe. It's a thing that terrorizes every community in America. And so I think, for the large part, people, and to go to, sort of drawing your point on racism, people are sold that they need police. Police are justified in America on the back of a very racialized criminal narrative, that there are just roving bands of Black people who rove around America, a la escaped slaves, who will make this place dangerous, uniquely dangerous than any other country in the developed world in people's minds, because no other country has the number of police, militarized police that we do. And that's just the reality.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point about how I went to school with people who did, frankly, way more illegal activity in high school than I did, and had sort of fuck cops attitude and all that stuff. And then when I saw their attitudes towards the Dakota Access Pipeline, and all of a sudden they were very pro cop. All of a sudden, when you add the sort of like scary racialized other.
I think you can also think about it in the sense of like, people get caught up online in the conversation about like, well, how police kill more Black people per capita than they kill white people, or police kill a lot more white people in totality every year than they kill Black people. In reality, the police kill more white people in America than the police in any other white country kill white people at a rate way higher than that. And so the question becomes like, how many Black people in America do the police have to kill to be allowed to kill as many white people as they do? Because that's really the reality of America. It's just like white supremacists think it's an own to say like, well, police actually shoot a lot of white people here. It's like they do. And the reason they're allowed to is because occasionally, well, not occasionally, at a very high rate actually per capita, they also kill Black people. And in countries where they don't have as many Black people to kill, the police actually also don't kill as many white people. And so white people just become like, for, an externality of that racist system in many ways. Well, poor white people do.
Right.
And to add to that, they always say too, like you don't see white people protesting or rioting when a white person gets shot by police. Well, I mean, you guys are cheering them on. That's why it's happening. Like, you should be angry when anyone gets killed by the police. Like, why aren't you mad? Makes me angry.
Other people being like cucked by the police is none of my business. I just think it's like, it's sad. It's sad that in this country that, not even just with police violence, but with general social services like Medicare for all, like any number of things that other countries in Europe have that we're not allowed to have, forget being communist or socialist, whatever, the underlying logic is always allowed to be, well, there are some brown people in this country who might benefit from it when they don't quote unquote deserve it. And so I think America is unique in its ability to deny its people basic resources, regardless of race, just by nature of the racist narrative that this country is promoted on.
Right. All right, let's go to some IMs, and then that's the show. Solo Vey, Matt, here's an insane / genius IQ right-wing take to keep an eye out for in the wild that I recently encountered. Derek Chauvin was actually the one good apple in the department, a Serpico of murder, if you will, and all the cops that testified against him are the blue wall of corruption, just psycho enough of an idea to catch on. I've seen that one, but I could, maybe not surprise you, but I can one-up you on the insanity of what some right-wingers, especially in the QAnon world, think. Are you guys ready for this one? Derek Chauvin is actually, this whole thing is a mirage. It's all fake. And Derek Chauvin is actually a crisis actor played by that guy from Cash Cab, Ben Bailey. And this whole thing was obviously a ruse to spark racial unrest in the country.
I think that, QAnon is one of the worst.
Don't ask me about the Cash Cab one. They just think he looks like him. It's amazing, isn't it?
I was going to say, I think QAnon is one of the worst conspiracy theories because it's pro-cop and most aren't.
Flairchild says, don't let cinema ruin the phrase, fuck off. I won't. Oh, right, because if her
Matt, can you hear us?
That's what
no, there's no way you can hear us right now.
Matt, Matt.
Bender, you're stupid.
Yo, can you hear us?
Matt is going off, dropping bars. What
just happened? Do you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you, but I don't think you can hear us.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You were talking over Brandon.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
I'm sorry. I didn't hear you at all. That was really weird. You guys cut off completely.
No, it was a power play. I get it. Okay, go ahead.
No, I would never do that. I feel horrible now. No, that was really the sound. Go ahead, Brandon. I'm not saying anything anymore.
No, I don't remember anything what I was saying. Go ahead. Seriously.
But I don't even know where we were now.
Brandon was talking about QAnon.
I was just saying that, like, as someone who follows a lot of conspiracy theories, like QAnon to me strikes me as one of the worst ones because it's like pro-America and like pro-cop, and most like real conspiracy people, like, they don't tend to be pro-cop unless they're also white supremacists.
God, right. Now I'm completely caught off guard, and I'm worried this is going to happen again, and I'm just going to run rampant over the feed.
We'll just let you read
guys.
IMs. Read just a few more, and then we'll head out.
Okay. All right. Don't let cinema ruin the phrase "fuck off." I won't, says Flair Child. Is that what her ring was saying in that Instagram photo?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know. I gotta say, like, I hate when people don't know what to do, like when they're on camera or something, so they flip the camera off. I think it's just the laziest like gesture. I don't like "fuck off" as a gesture. That's anti-solidarity.
Right.
I just have to tell you, I'm laughing because my stomach's grumbling so loud, and Sam's still here, and he's made a face at me like 4 or 5 times because it's thunderous. So I'm not laughing at what anyone else is saying, but keep going, Matt.
Okay, maybe you should eat some more cashews, Emma.
Wow, Matt, food shaming. Emma.
Like Bro Flamingo called in, was saying something serious, and it just was like, I thought the mic was gonna pick it up. Keep going.
No, we can't hear it all, but that is hilarious. The cashews might be doing it to you. It might be like reacting how gum reacts, where it just makes you hungrier and hungrier, and it's not actually satiating your stomach in any way.
The thunderous like stomach grumbling was like white noise, which prevented Matt from hearing us talk, obviously.
I still don't know what happened there. I didn't hear anything. That was so bizarre. Just cut off completely. All right. There was a few more IMs to read. Let me see. MIDI. This is a good one. MIDI Doctors. Hey, MR crew. Remember to remind everyone to hit the like button and subscribe, of course, all the time. Alex says bikes could and should replace a huge part of our fossil fuel transit, but continuing to frame biking as some kind of fruity recreational activity seriously hurts the cause. Demian says, did anyone watch Richard Wolff destroy Destiny over and over and over again yesterday? The Surfs hosted a debate. It was pretty brutal. I know we have a no Destiny discussion on the show, but I wanted to read that because all I could see yesterday on Twitter was Richard Wolff. Apparently, I didn't see the clips yet, but Richard Wolff apparently did really good in that debate.
Yeah, I heard that too.
I watched it. I tweeted about it. People can check that out. I think, we don't need to hear more from Destiny.
Right. Emma's Pause It Fund says, old Matt is the Snapple cap of the Majority Report. Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Benito says, speaking of Pat Tillman, have you guys ever read the John Krakauer book about him? Is it good? Matt, that sounds like something you might know. Did you read that book?
No, but I watched the documentary on him. I don't know where Matt is, but
sorry, which book was that?
Oh my God, I honestly thought my my sound cut out again. I didn't realize Matt thankfully actually just left the mic.
Which book was they asking about?
I don't know. Matt?
Bender?
What's up?
What book was?
Oh my God, the sound is cutting out again.
Okay, yeah,
Matt.
We should wrap.
Let's wrap.
We'll wrap. But the book was where is it? John Krakauer's book about Pat Tillman.
Oh no, I've not read that, but that sounds.
All right, so that's the show because I don't know what's going on with my volume. And anyway, we got to wrap it up over on that side for other things. So tonight, youtube.com/Matt Binder, 9 p.m. Eastern time. Come join the live stream, subscribe to the channel now so you don't forget. Once again, youtube.com/Matt Binder. It'll also be multi-streamed on twitch.tv/Matt Binder and on my Twitter @Matt Binder. So catch it there, or doomedpod.com for the podcast version of the show that'll go up shortly after the live stream. Brandon, Matt, why don't you guys plug what you guys are doing in the next, tonight or in the future?
Yeah, just tonight at 8 Eastern, Left Reckoning, folks. Check it out. Yep.
We'll have a new episode of Discord around the Discord. Wow, I really got to think about how to separate my branding out from other people's. We'll have a new episode out by early next week. And of course, check out our Twitch channel at twitch.com/The Discourse.
All right, folks, that is the show for today. Check out the Nomiki show at 3 p.m. Join the new Majority Report Discord channel. I will see you all, and Brandon too, I guess. We'll see you all next week. The rest of the MR crew will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive